So box, 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 box.
Hi, my name is Rochelle, and you're watching or listening to Box F1 Pod. Or you're listening to my dog barking because she won't stop. Welcome to the final episode of the 2024 F1 season. What a year it has been. And it's been a minute since we've talked, but I was super sick during this last triple header, and I just could not keep up with the races, not to mention the new drama that was happening every 35 seconds. So I'm so sorry I've been a bit absent, but I'm back for a grand finale episode. But because we have so much to cover, I've changed the structure a little bit instead of our usual digital warm-up race analysis situation. Since so much that happened off track is so important, I want to focus a big part of this episode on that. However, so much of what transpired off track was impacted by what happened on track. So I want to kick things off with a very, very quick triple header analysis / recap, with just running through the main things that happened in Vegas and Qatar and focusing a little bit more on today's race before we dive into literally everything else, from babies to feuds to farewells. There's gonna be a lot of tears in today's episode, just warning you in advance. But yeah, that's sort of the plan for today. So without further ado, it's time for a new section I'm calling the super quick triple header analysis. All right, so we will be recapping Vegas and Qatar and Abu Dhabi, but with a little extra time spent on Abu Dhabi, obviously, since this was the latest race. But before we dive into what's going on track, I want to call out one major shift in things behind the scenes, and that's that the FIA decided to do a little reshuffle before the final 3 races, with their race director resigning. He did give a statement saying he did not in fact resign. So he was fired, and it shows. I know that a lot of people were super frustrated with a lot of the decisions coming out of the racing director's office. I know a lot of his decisions were the things that caused that letter written by the drivers, which we'll get into in the bulk of this episode. But as George, president of the GPDP, whatever it's called, Foundation Association, said, they were in a space where they could work together and move forward, and now they're starting sort of with a blank slate. And the fact that this race director has just been thrust into the final 3 races of the season really shows, because a lot of the decisions that have been happening in Vegas and in Qatar and today are really confusing people. The penalties that have been given out, the general ruling on certain things, the racing director's instructions that they all get before a race, everything's been kind of strange, and everyone's confused and kind of annoyed. But we'll get into some of those main ones in a moment. So let's kick things off with a very brief Vegas recap. The biggest takeaways from Vegas was that it was absolutely freezing and the track smelled like weed. The drivers were joking that they were going to be driving high. The smell was that strong. But yeah, that was basically the biggest complaints. The drivers were wearing 25 layers. It was below freezing. And it also caused a lot of chaos on track, especially with tires and keeping things warm. They were struggling. George Russell won that race, and he had a stellar drive from start to finish. I was very happy that he won. We're all happy, but it was a good race from him. He was asked if he jumped into the fountain after the race, and he said no. And the reason his clothes were so wet was from the champagne. He said he was too cold after the race and didn't want to get ill, because last year he was ill all the way from Vegas until February and didn't want to do it again, which is very practical and makes perfect sense. But when he says it, he sounds like geriatric and it's quite funny. It's also quite funny because he was joking about Max celebrating. He's like, I was on my way to the airport and I saw Max at the bar at 9 a.m. and Max was like, I was thirsty. But those comments are what make him seem like he's retired. There was a cute video of the team celebration where they take the team photo, and Carmen and Lewis were both in that picture as well. And they both bolted before champagne just poured on poor George. There was one other major thing in Vegas that happened, and that was like an issue with Charles and Carlos, where basically Charles was told on the radio that Carlos was given instructions not to overtake him, and then Carlos overtook him anyways. And Charles on the radio goes, "Have you tried telling him in Spanish?" Which made me laugh. But Carlos did have like really shitty strategy throughout the race, and it was also like classic Ferrari communication, where he was told to come in, and then as soon as he's at the pit entrance, he's told, "Never mind, don't come in," and he's like, what the fuck? And then he ended up like getting in Lewis's way because he had to swerve out of the pit lane, and Lewis was like, "What the fuck?" And then Carlos was like, "What the fuck?" I'd be so fined right now. And so Carlos was really upset. By the time he boxed, and things were really confusing, and not that he didn't know that he was told not to overtake Charles, but he did it anyway, and his explanation was basically all of this. And Charles was really upset about how things ended up playing out, and especially because it meant that he didn't make the podium. He finished P4 and Carlos finished P3. His rant on the radio was like a script for a villain origin story. He said, "Yeah, I did my job, but being nice fucks me over all the fucking time. All the fucking time. It's not even being nice. It's just being respectful. I know I need to shut up, but at one point it's always the same. So, oh my fucking God." It was like very dramatic on the radio, and sort of resigned. He's like, "I'm basically not going to put up with this anymore." And it was very warranted, but at the same time, I see both sides of the situation, right? Carlos has absolutely nothing to lose, and them finishing the way they finished wouldn't impact their standings in the constructors. So Carlos going all out for himself instead of, like, why wouldn't he go balls to the wall at this point? He got fucking fired. And it's frustrating that Charles ends up being collateral damage, but I think, and Charles talked a lot this weekend about everything he's learned from Carlos, but I think the most important lesson he should have learned from Carlos is to fight for yourself. And Charles is right. He does kind of roll over a lot and listen to what Ferrari is telling him to do. And he shouldn't, because at the end of the day, Ferrari doesn't always make the best calls. And like almost all of Carlos's best moments have been when he ignored key strategy calls from Ferrari, like where he just decided to strategize for himself, basically. And that doesn't make Carlos a bad team player, but it's an important lesson for Charles to take away. And that's why it's hard to like say this one's right, this one's wrong. And this was also where, by the way, this like whole thing was, everyone was saying that, see, this proves that Charles and Carlos have a PR relationship, blah, 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 blah. And I'm sure they'll keep saying it. And I don't know why. They're very clearly good friends, and even more importantly, good coworkers. Charles says all the time, "Me and Carlos have always had a great relationship, and especially when something goes wrong on track, we always talk it out later and we're fine. Like, we always have a conversation about it and we're okay." And I think that's what's really important, is that they have great, Ferrari might have shitty communication, but Carlos and Charles do not. They seem to be like really on the same page to discuss everything that happens on track. They get really heated in the moment. They both say like weird shit on the radio that's like mean, but like they both understand the adrenaline, and they both like, they just have like such a high level of respect for each other that I think it's very impressive the way they're able to operate as a team. And I think that teamwork is, Ferrari's risking a lot getting rid of it for Lewis. While I totally get the business move, they're risking a lot, because that sort of relationship is really hard to come by. And sort of the Charles and Carlos thing sort of continues on. I'll talk a bit about it in the off-track content portion of this episode, but it does continue on where they keep having to defend and explain their relationship. And I just like don't understand why. To me, they have the best relationship on the grid between two drivers, both in terms of skill. I mean, yeah, people can say that Charles is in raw pace faster than Carlos, but what Charles has in raw pace, Carlos more than makes up in his strategic mindset and his ability to analyze and his ability to understand the car. And again, I think that's what makes them such a good team. And so evenly matched, if that makes sense. I'm just really sad this relationship is like over. Even though Ferrari keeps saying, see, like, he's coming back, whatever. We'll get to the crying portion later on. Let's focus on the facts. Moving on to the Qatar recap, there was a really sweet moment during the sprint race when Lando was leading the whole time. He had pole position, whatever. He was leading the whole race, and just at the checkered flag, he slows down just enough for Oscar to pass him and win the sprint. And it was right in front of George's face. George was not happy. He's like, I get it, but this isn't what fans want to see. This isn't the kind of racing we should be like doing. He's so high and mighty sometimes. It's like funny, but also annoying. But it was basically Lando's way of saying thank you for Oscar giving him the sprint win in Brazil. Because at the time, Lando, the Drivers' Championship, was still within reach. But considering now they were just fighting for a Constructors' Championship, any point counts. And so it was, I think Lando was quite, what's the word? Guilty. I think he felt a little bit guilty about the way he had won the Brazilian sprint race. And he wanted to do something back. And he did say after the race that the team told him not to do it. And he knew he could do it. And he did it. And, you know, everyone knows I have my issues with Lando, but I do respect this move quite a bit. George doesn't. Another entirely random moment from the sprint race was apparently in the pit lane. When the lights went out, Checo just didn't move, and he had to be prompted to do so by his engineer. And then in an interview after, Christian was like, you know, when the lights go out, you're supposed to go. And then in an interview about it, Christian was like, you know, when the lights go out, you're supposed to go, which made me giggle and just sounds like a Will Buxton special from Drive to Survive. It was really funny. But there was another incident in Qatar where it took several laps for a safety car to be deployed. And this is also one of the issues with the FIA, like making weird decisions, like waiting 3 laps while there's like aggressive debris on the track to send a safety car out so that they're safe and so that the debris could be cleared. But there was like a whole ass mirror in the middle of the track. They were all just driving around. But what was really funny to me about this was that post-race in the media pen, Yuki was asked about the mirror and he went, it was a mirror? I heard beaver. And I was like, why is there a beaver in the Middle East? But then I was like, oh, maybe it's global warming. And I just love how he was sure he heard beaver, realized it made no sense, and then tried to rationalize why there would be a beaver there, and his conclusion was global warming. It was fascinating. I thought it was hilarious. I love that. Why is there a beaver in the Middle East? Oh, right, global warming. Naturally. Love Yuki. Zhou finished 8th. He scored Kick Sauber their first points all season. He got a hero's welcome coming back. Everyone was cheering for him and clapping for him. He had a great race and he won Driver of the Day in Qatar. 10 out of 10. Made me so happy. It was a great send-off to him. I'm really sad he's not going to have a seat next year. You guys know how much I love his vibes and his fit, and I think it's important. I really don't think he got to showcase his full abilities this year, given their car. Even Valtteri didn't score a point. So, like, you know what I mean? So, and we all know Valtteri's a great driver. So it's a bit sad that this is how he's exiting F1, but at least he was able to leave on this high. So in Qatar is also, and we're going to talk in depth about the fallout, aftermath of this, but basically the incident between George and Max happened during qualifying. Max and George were both on a slow lap, but George decided that Max was driving unnecessarily slowly and impeding his lap, even though everyone was on a slow lap. And he complained about it quite aggressively in the radio. I think he made like a show of like kind of swerving to try to slow down so he didn't hit Max. So they went to the stews and he argued it, and it resulted in Max getting a 1-place grid drop, which meant that George was starting Qatar on pole position, which mattered fuck all because Max overtook him before like the second turn in lap 1, and never saw George again. So all that work for nothing. A for effort though, George, you really, really tried. Christian described him as hysterical, which kind of seems correct. We'll get into all of the aftermath and what exactly happened, but what I really enjoyed was Fernando was asked about the ruling, and he was like, well, I think this is great. From now on, I'm going to drive up really fast to drivers on their slow lap and then make a big show about braking, so then they can lose a grid spot. Which made me laugh, but also is totally something he would do. Do you remember that time when he very dramatically swerved in the pit lane to make it seem like he almost crashed into someone and didn't? It's very much his vibes. All right, moving on to, Max won Qatar, by the way. Yeah, he won Qatar. Quick trackside in Abu Dhabi, a couple celebs that we saw in town besides Brad Pitt. There was a really funny video of Brad Pitt walking up to the Ferrari drivers, and Carlos is on his phone, and Brad Pitt walks up to him, and I think he was like saying hey before he reached him, and Carlos just didn't look up from his phone, and he clapped Carlos on the arm, and he was like, hey, and Carlos like, oh, hi. Completely unfazed by Brad Pitt. Then he went to say hello to Charles, who was a bit more active in the greeting, and Arthur Leclerc is just sitting in the back like, hello. I think they're all so sick of seeing Brad Pitt everywhere. And in Abu Dhabi, actually, so after the podium, where Charles got third, after the whole podium thing, they had to film a scene for the movie where apparently Brad Pitt won the race and Charles and George were on the podium with him. So they had to film another podium scene where George and Charles had to spray Brad Pitt with champagne. It was quite entertaining. It must have been so frustrating though, where Charles had to be on the podium in a place he didn't want to be in, and then have to refilm in the exact same position where he didn't want to be in. Third. Jason Statham was on track again. He hung out with Yuki. Love that relationship. I also it'll never make me not laugh when Yuki was asked who's gonna play you in the movie, and he's like, Jason Statham. Obviously, who else would play me? He loves him, and I love that he loves him. Terry Crews was also there, slightly random, but I think he said it was his fourth race. I remember seeing him out and about. I kind of thought he was just an American race kind of guy, but he seems like he actually really likes F1. Lando posted a picture with him, and the song on his story was 1,000 Miles by Vanessa Carlton, which was 10 out of 10 from Lando. He had his moments this weekend, I'm gonna be honest. He also, the screen said that he was gonna be doing the post-race interviews with Nico Rosberg, but I did not see or hear him, so I don't know why the screen said that he was there. Anyway, so one of the major things that happened during the race, what happened in turn one, Max did his usual bolt forward situation, miscalculated, did not have enough space to fit between Oscar and the barrier, which ended up pushing Oscar off the track and ruining his race basically. He still raced, but it wasn't great. And Max got a 10-second penalty for that and 2 penalty points, which is a little odd because usually things that happen in the first lap are considering racing incidents. But he said he did feel bad. He said he didn't really care about the penalty. It didn't make a difference to him either way. But he didn't want to apologize to Oscar because he made a mistake and it impacted Oscar, and he felt bad because Oscar's his friend and he wanted to apologize, which he did. And Oscar actually immediately called out the apology into the media. He's like, Max came up to me, he apologized, it's all in the past, we all need a fucking break, which I appreciated. And also it's a mountain of difference to the way George Russell reacted. Some other key highlights in this race: Lando has finally kept the lead for an entire race. So I'm very proud of him. He's only had 8 or 10 chances to figure out how to convert a pole to a win consistently throughout the whole race. Lewis went from P16 to P4 with a great last drive from Mercedes. I'm really glad he got to go out on a high because the way qualifying went, we weren't sure that was going to happen. Carlos was on Lando's tail the whole time, and he did absolutely everything he possibly could to pressure Lando into mistake or to catch up to him or to literally do anything. But alas, he was just a tad too slow, and oddly enough, Lando was absolutely perfect today. Charles had an insane drive from P19 to P3. He was trying so hard to get the championship for Ferrari and for Carlos, and it was really incredible to see, and it was really sad to hear how heartbroken he was about it. You could see it hit him really hard. On the radio, he said he really wished he could have won this for Carlos. He said that he wished Carlos the best and it was an absolute pleasure working with him. And he said that he was so sorry that he wasn't enough today. What? Charles? Stop. He's been so sweet and sentimental all week and it's been breaking my heart. I cry every time. I've been just crying all weekend, honestly, for everything Charles does. And his engineer's response was, thank you, Charles. After all that, he just went, thanks. Charles did get driver of the day. I think it was very well deserved. Very close runner-up is Lewis Hamilton. There were a few races that ended kind of sad, considering it was quite sad that Checo was out in the first lap, and this is potentially his last race in F1. Franco Colapinto also DNF'd, which is sad because for now his F1 dreams are over. It's a good thing he's young, but he did thank Williams on the radio for helping make his F1 dreams come true, which also teared me up. Liam Lawson DNF'd, but he'll be fine. Valtteri Bottas DNF'd, which is very sad. He had some damage, and considering this is his last race, even though he keeps posting Instagram posts being like, what's next? What's next? What's next? It's rather funny. This was technically his last race, which also is very heartbreaking. Kevin Magnussen had a not so fabulous race. He finished last after all the DNFs. And it's also his last race. So, you know, things could have been better for everyone all around. But we'll get to all the goodbyes that we have to say. And unfortunately, there's quite a bit. Dick in the box, I think was just Max, but he apologized for it. So I retract that. I don't think there was a dick in the box on track. Off track, however, that's a different story, and we'll get into that in just a moment. Oh, before I forget, Pierre Gasly is the first F1 driver in history to ever finish a season with $0 in damage. Way to go. Way to go, Pierre is a shining light that is an Alpine shithole. And with that, we conclude the super quick triple header analysis. On to the digital warm-up race main portion of this episode. Woo! Lap 1, wins. We've had a lot of wins. Kicking things off with Max, who won the Drivers' Championship in Vegas. And he partied all night. As I mentioned, George said he saw him at the bar at 9 a.m. while he was on his way to the airport, because George is boring. Max was doing press with a beer in his hand, and I don't think it was the Heineken Zero he's sponsored by. And you know what? Max is always very honest and blunt, and the beer helped. He gave some fabulous interviews. He walked right up to Zak Brown and said, "You said I could only win with the fastest car." And Zak Brown was like, loved it. Christian said it's very stressful to have a driver win a championship in Las Vegas. And you know what? I believe him. Sounds like Max went hard, but it also kind of sounds like he went super hard for other reasons, because he's a dad, soon to be. We'll get into that. He also, this was rather passive aggressive. I love Max, and I don't think he's a passive aggressive person, but I do think he was a little peeved by McLaren and Lando this season. So I think he said it with a bit of intent to be kind of mean when he told Lando that his time will come. It sounds a bit, condescending, just a little bit. Damn, if there's one person I'm never going to criticize, it's Max Verstappen. That's not true. I won't criticize Charles or Carlos or Max Verstappen or Alex Albon. I have a list. I have a list of people I just will not criticize, apparently. And I somehow always come up with an excuse for Max. But I will say, I never have to try that hard to come up with an excuse for Max. It just rolls off my tongue. So yes, Max won the Drivers' Championship, did the press with his beer in his hand, gave some fantastic answers. He was having a great time, and it clearly was a relief for him to win. I think we all knew he was going to win. Lando was just not in a place mentally to win a Drivers' Championship when it was just thrust upon him in the middle of the season with no warning, which is fair enough, I think. They didn't expect to have the best car. He just kind of landed with the best car. And so I do think he was getting a bit aggressive in interviews. saying that him and Max weren't actually that good friends and like all this stuff when they clearly are friends. Like, I don't know. Lando's weird in interviews. Like, Carlos described him as like way too honest in interviews, which is the way Max is described, but they're honest in very different ways. Like, Max doesn't quite come off as petty as Lando. His is much more matter of fact, and Lando's comes off as a bit childish. But he does have some very funny quips, so I'm not totally against it. In Abu Dhabi, McLaren won the Constructors' Championship for the first time in 26 years. 26 years ago, when they won last, Andrea Stella was in college studying engineering. Zak Brown was racing cars somewhere, probably still too big to fit into one. And Lando and Oscar had not yet been born. That is crazy. I was 4. So it was a very, very, very long time ago. It took very long for them to come back to where they are. So I am happy for the whole team as a whole. Zak Brown in particular, not that happy for him. He has such frat star energy in like the worst way. He was just running around. I think Crofty said, there's a few people who might fall victim to a fist bump from one Zak Brown or something along those lines. And it was really funny. He just celebrates like a frat star, and it's annoying. And then Lando, his little sidekick, also celebrating like a little British frat star. He said that him and Zach had plans to get smashed that evening, which I have absolutely no doubt that they will be. And I hope Oscar is with them because I want Oscar to have fun, but I also want Oscar to stay pure from that kind of energy. He couldn't be frat star if he tried, honestly, but I hope he gets to celebrate too, even though he wasn't on the podium with Lando. All right, lap 2, feuds. All right, so one big drama that we've yet to discuss is the fact that Esteban was dropped by Alpine for the final race. Literally for Abu Dhabi. He was dropped last week. I believe he's testing for Haas tomorrow and Monday and Tuesday of this week. So he's in Abu Dhabi. He was at the driver's dinner. He was just not in none of the press, media, anything for Alpine. He wasn't mentioned any place that he would be, like for the driver's photos, like the group photos, for the team photos. He was just replaced by Jack Doohan, who rocked up today. Like he was just hanging around in the garage, and they just like shoved him as if he's been there the whole time. It makes me rather sad. It makes me really sad that Daniel's not there, but it makes me extra frustrated for Esteban that he was there up until the last minute. Like, to the last second. Daniel didn't come back after, summer break or something? Esteban was here 4 days ago. It's insane to me. And he's there. He's, like, probably watching them take the team photo. Like, whatever. He released a statement, and the statement implies that he was going to stay, because there were some rumors about the fact that because he agreed to test for Haas, he wasn't allowed to drive for Alpine, which is strange because Carlos is testing for Williams. Like, I'm pretty sure Lewis is testing for Ferrari. Everyone is testing for their new team. So what would that have to do with anything? His statement on Instagram was liked by Lewis, Jack, who also commented, "Thank you for taking me under your wing," and like, "best of luck," whatever, and Lando, not Pierre. But the statement said, "I would like to first and foremost thank the mechanics and engineers across all functions at the track. Enstone and Viry-Chatillon, who have raced alongside me these last 5 seasons. We have shared so much together, and I'm proud to call many of you my friends. I leave Alpine/Renault with great memories and the pride of having been the driver who brought the team's best results since its return to the sport, climbing the top 2 steps of the podium in Bahrain, Hungary, and Brazil. It was also an honor to play a part in finishing P4 in the Constructors' Championship in 2022. I know how much all of those moments meant for everybody, and feeling that sense of achievement and joy alongside the team is what I am taking away with me. It has not been an easy year on track for the team, and the second part of the season has been especially difficult for various reasons. I do not regret a single thing, knowing I gave it 100% every single session, like I always have. To the hundreds of hardworking men and women at Enstone and Viry, I apologize that I will not be able to come see you in person and have a proper farewell. As you know, the plan was always to race one last time this weekend and personally say goodbye to you all next week. I was looking forward to both of those things. This is not how I wanted things to end. That said, the world of F1 is small, and I'm sure I will see many of you again soon. I would also like to wish nothing but great things to my friend Jack as he takes the next big step in his career at this week's Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Okay, if you've been here for a while, you know how I feel about Esteban. I do have tears in my eyes. You know how I feel about Esteban. I think the fact that he's had issues with so many people clearly speaks to something that we're not seeing, because he comes off as like an extremely friendly guy. But this statement made me rather upset, because he has in fact given everything to this team. He has in fact delivered the best results this team has had since they became Alpine and not Renault. He has given them their only win, multiple podiums, driven their shit ass car across the line multiple times when it probably shouldn't have gone there. Yes, he's made a bunch of mistakes, but I just don't see what warrants this sort of treatment. Like, what could he have possibly done to warrant being like shoved out for like 3 days before the end of the season? Just like let him finish. Could it have really been that bad? Like, could it? It just feels rude. It feels so rude given everything you've accomplished together. I don't know. If you remember certain exits from the Alpine team, none of them have been particularly graceful, calm, lacking drama. Like, all of them have been dramatic. Fernando Alonso, Oscar Piastri, Otmar, now Esteban, like, they've all been laced with negativity. So they certainly have a reputation for parting ways negatively. And the only good thing they have going for them right now is Pierre. And then soon to be Jack, because I do like Jack. None of this is his fault. As usual, the driver coming in is not at fault for how the driver exiting is treated. It's just a shame that the exits of so many drivers is marred with conflict. Unless, of course, you are Carlos, who is marred with no conflict other than being fired for doing a good job. All right, next feud, drivers versus the FIA. Super excited to get into this. Between, I believe, Brazil and Vegas, the drivers penned a letter through the Grand Prix Drivers Association, which is the director of which is, of course, George Russell. The letter reads as follows. As is the case with every sport, competitors must abide by the referee's decision, whether they like it or not. Indeed, whether they agree with it or not. That is how sports works. The drivers, our members, are no different and fully understand that. Our members are professional drivers racing in Formula One, the pinnacle of international motorsport. They are the gladiators, and every racing weekend they put on a great show for the fans. With regards to swearing, there is a difference between swearing intended to insult others and more casual swearing, such as you might use to describe bad weather, or indeed an inanimate object such as a Formula One car or a driving situation. We urge the FIA president to also consider his own tone and language when talking to our member drivers, or indeed about them, whether in a public forum or otherwise. Further, our members are adults. They do not need to be given instructions via the media about matters as trivial as the wearing of jewelry and underpants. The GPDA has on countless occasions expressed its view that driver monetary fines are not appropriate for our sport. For the past 3 years, we have called upon the FIA president to share the details and strategy regarding how the FIA's financial fines are allocated and where the funds are spent. We have also relayed our concerns about the negative image financial fines bring to the sport. We once again request that the FIA president provide financial transparency and direct open dialogue with us. All stakeholders, FIA, F1, the teams, and the GPDA should jointly determine how and where the money is spent for the benefit of our sport. The GPDA wishes to collaborate in a constructive way with all the stakeholders, including the FIA president, in order to promote our great sport for the benefit of everyone who works in it, pays for it, watches it, and indeed loves it. We are playing our part. Best regards, the director and chairman of the GPDA on behalf of the Grand Prix drivers. # Racing United for our safety, our sports, and our fans. You will note that this is signed the director and chairman of the GPDA on behalf of the Grand Prix drivers. This was clearly, now you can see where there's influence from the drivers, right? The swearing, Max Verstappen, probably Charles Leclerc. Underpants and jewelry, Lewis Hamilton. So you can see the influence of all the drivers, of the drivers. You know this was all penned together, but the dramatic flair was certainly added by George Russell, because George Russell is literally like the president of the HOA in your neighborhood or the head mom at the PTA. Like he means business. And the way this whole thing went with Max, which we'll get into, but the way all of that went, it's just giving so much Karen energy. And he does it all in such a posh British accent. It's like, what's the word? Head boy. He's acting like he's acting like Percy Weasley. Right. George Russell. Percy Weasley. Head mom of the PTA. President of the HOA. All of this energy combined into one human. It's a lot. It's a lot. I can imagine it can get annoying. It can get a bit annoying. So Percy Russell penned this and posted it on their Instagram that they now share all together. By the way, George said that they didn't get a response from the FIA. He also told the media that the drivers were not informed about the director being fired, and he was like, it'd be nice if we were made aware of these decisions and not found out through the press. And Mohammed Ben Sulayem I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, I'm so sorry if that's not, but the FIA president made a statement that was basically like, it's none of their business. So like, he doesn't seem to have any intention of replying or respecting this letter from the drivers, which is a shame, because I think they should certainly have a better relationship. I think the craziest thing to come out of this letter is the fact that the drivers don't know how their fines are being spent, which I think is crazy. They should be made aware of how their fines are being spent. And I also think it's quite reasonable to ask that the FIA not make underwear rules and jewelry rules. Like safety, yes, there should be like guidelines for how to be the safest within the car, but like strictly enforcing jewelry bans and specific underwear bans and like the swearing is insane. The swearing is so crazy. Like, and also to be consistent with the punishment, because why did Leclerc get fined and Verstappen get community service that he's never gonna do? So, you know, like, it's just consistency and transparency seems to be the least the FIA could offer their drivers, I think. In other feuds, Toto versus Christian. So this feud this is an ongoing feud. This feud is actually never gonna go away, and I'm totally fine with that. Toto in the press called Christian a yapping terrier, to which Christian says he loves terriers. He's had several. One was named Flavio. And he basically says that terriers are very loyal, and he's proud to be called a terrier, because who wouldn't want to be a terrier? And then zinger, he says, I'd rather be a terrier than a wolf. Bants. Their beef is funny. I will never be sick of team principal beef. I find it hilarious to see this old man arguing about these things. It's so funny. When the drivers have beef, I'm a little more like, guys, I don't know why I'm expecting more from the drivers than from adult men, but like I am. But Christian and Toto's rivalry will never not be funny. I think the only point where it got to not be funny was in 2021, because their rivalry was severely directly impacting their drivers and the way they were interacting with each other on track. Because I really think that the environment from the teams like filtered into how they viewed each other and how they behaved on track on both ends, which I think made the whole thing worse. But other than that, I think it's just lighthearted, excellent fluff for DTS. Moving on to slightly more serious beef, which again, I don't think is that serious, but I just think it got a little insane. George versus Max. An unexpected turn of events in the last breath of the 2024 F1 season. gave this sport new life. We're all living for it. So I covered it a bit in the racing portion, but Max in Qatar got pole for the first time in months. He was super excited. Like, yes, he won in Brazil, but like from the back, which was rewarding in its own way, but he hadn't gotten pole in a while. But during qualifying, George said that Max impeded him on an out lap or during a slow lap for driving unnecessarily slowly. And they both went to the stews room, and apparently George like really threw a fit in there and like went hard in defending why Max should get a penalty for this. And Max did get a 1 place grade penalty, which again, I believe has never been done in the sport, is a stat I read. Maybe it has been done in sport. Even if it has been, highly, highly unusual and weird. And it's not like it was a severe punishment, but it was like an annoying punishment for something that didn't deserve to be punished. So Max's frustration was completely warranted. Again, it was the FIA's fault, not George's necessarily, but Max didn't like the way George behaved in the stewards room and brought it up in the post-race press conferences. He said, God, it's going to be so hard to sum up everything. I've never seen anyone try to screw someone over that hard. For me, I've lost all respect. I find it ridiculous how he wants to make sure I get a penalty. You know what it is? He acts decent in front of the camera here, but when you talk to him personally, he's a different person, and I cannot stand that. What Max is saying is quite clear. He's calling George two-faced, which checks out. George does seem very goody-goody, Percy Weasley vibes in front of authority. Like it sounds like the way he was defending this penalty was very like sucking up to them. And from what I understand, I forgot who said this. Gunther, I think, said in a podcast that normally when you go to the steward's room, you are defending your behavior and explaining the situation, but you're not really arguing a case necessarily. And from the sounds of it, George was like super arguing a case how Max must be punished for this. And Max was like, what the fuck? And I think what really like sealed the deal for him was the next morning when he came over to him talking to Carlos and someone else, I can't remember who, and just like hugged Max, like gave him a side hug and was like, hey, what's up? And Max was like, what the fuck? Like, you just like fought so hard to screw me over and now we're buddies. I think that really pissed him off because it really is the opposite of what Max is. Like, he's not a suck up. He's not two-faced. If he does go apeshit in the steward's room against you to try to get you a penalty, he's going to do that in the media. George wasn't doing that. He was acting one way and then a different way. And like, you get the picture. So then the race is over. A week passes and now we're in Abu Dhabi. And then George Russell literally goes mental this week on media day on Thursday. He says that's just racing. And I do not see why he felt the need for this personal attack. And I am not going to take it. We are adults and we are mature. And as I said right now, it's not even something I'm thinking about. I never have the intention to throw Max under the bus like this until he comes out and slams me so personally. But this is not like I'm angry with Max. This is just me setting the record straight. But I'm not going to stand here watching some guy slam me personally as he has. I've known Max a long time and I know what he's capable of. And you know, he said to me he's gonna purposely go out of his way to crash into me and put me on my fucking head in the wall. I knew that was a bit of heat in the moment thing, but when I went to see him the next day at the driver's parade, Checo was there, Carlos was there, and we were joking around a little bit, you know? I saw it in his eyes that he means it. He's a 4-time world champion. When I compare his actions to the one of Lewis is the sort of world champion who I aspire to be like. You know, the way he fought Max in 2021, it's hard, very hard. It's fair, but never beyond the line. And I think we've also got duties as drivers. I've got an 8-year-old nephew who's just started go-karting, who watches all of my races, watches TikTok, watches YouTube. And for a world champion to come out and he's going to go out of his way to crash into someone and put on their fucking head, that is not the sort of role models we should be. As I said, I'm not losing any sleep over it. I never, as I said, had the intention of coming out and speaking to you all like this, but he's gone too far now with his personal attack, and now I'm returning the favor and putting the truth out there. So as of tonight, for me, this is put to bed and it's in race mode and I'm focused on the weekend. I don't need to talk to him. I don't need to talk to him at all. There's nothing for me to say. Honestly, I'm an adult. I'm not losing any sleep over it whatsoever. I know what Max is like. This is not the first time I've seen him like this. I've seen him like this as a 14-year-old in the go-kart paddock. So this is just me sharing what really happened on Saturday. I think he's been enabled because nobody stood up to him. Lewis stood up to him in 2021 and Lewis lost that championship unfairly. Could you imagine the roles being reversed and Max losing that championship in the manner that Lewis lost that championship? I mean, Massey would be fearing for his life. I'm not looking to get Max penalized. I'm not looking for any repercussions from this. I'm standing up for myself, for a guy who's coming out, questioning my integrity as a person, slamming me in the press. And I just want to set the record straight. As I said, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But for me, he crossed the line that weekend, and that was too much. Yeah, so there was another quote where he called him a bully and he said, we all know what Max is like. He's been bullying everyone in F1 for years, blah, 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 blah. Max came out and was like, I didn't think it was that dramatic in the steward's room. And he said he's lying and putting random things together to tell a story that isn't true. Which he is. He's referencing like a decade's worth of content to describe what happened in the steward's room. I don't think Max's attack on George was that personal. He said he acts different in front of the media than he did in the steward's room, and he was annoyed. George went for the jugular. I do think it's a little much to accuse Max of potential murder. Like, why would Massey be fearing for his life? I also think it's a bit dramatic, very Percy Weasley of him to be like, we need to be good role models for children. George just took this so fucking far, like unnecessarily far, to the point where it's hilarious. And I think Max is laughing about it now because he's like, what? Like, why are you saying all of this? Like, the only thing that was relevant to last week was he said Max threatened to put his head through a wall, which sounds like something that George thinks sounds like something Max would say. Do you know what I mean? Maybe he did say it. Max might have said it jokingly. Potentially. It doesn't really sound like something he would say. It sounds like something George thinks sounds like something Max would say. And Max didn't put his head through his fucking wall. He just passed him and won. I don't know. George's rant left like kind of an icky feeling in my mouth. Max's was much less aggressive. He literally just said, George is two-faced. And George is like, he's a murderer. It was a little much. But one of my favorite things that came out of this was, for those of you who watched Hunger Games, you know that scene where Peeta tries to save him and Katniss before they go into the Hunger Games for the second time, and he's like on stage and he's like, it would all be fine if it wasn't for the baby. And then everyone goes, that's what Max's announcement of him expecting a child with Kelly came off like. Everyone keeps making memes of being like, this is like Max's Hunger Game moment. where George just like flew off the handle at Max, and Max is like, if it wasn't for the baby. And now George can't attack an expecting father. Responses from the other drivers have been low-key hilarious. Well, Lando, he was asked in the press conference or in the media pen what he thought about it, and he was like, well, I have respect for George, I have respect for Max, but I don't really care if they lose respect for each other because this is entertaining. I hope they continue to not have respect for each other. Which again, quite funny from Lando. He also posted a picture of the driver's dinner, and the caption was, yes, the ones you were thinking about were sat on complete opposite sides of the table. And Esteban posted a picture of the seating arrangement, and they were in fact sitting on opposite ends of the table. There was a rumor going around that I don't think was confirmed by any of the drivers that George was late to the dinner and the only empty seat was next to Max. And all the drivers thought it was hilarious. And he literally took the chair and moved it to the opposite end of the table. Very amusing. And also Lando's post where he's like, they're sat on opposite ends of the table. Max commented on it with a beef emoji. Like, Max is so unserious about this. I think George is still actually taking it quite seriously because he said way too many times that he doesn't care about it anymore in like one breath. Max, I don't think he cares anymore. And he actually said in a press conference, he's like, I think, it was on the stage, the fan stage. He was asked if he could have any other driver on like his team or something, who would it be? And the whole crowd shouted George, and he started laughing. And he was like, George and I will be fine. Like, we just need a break. We'll see each other in Monaco and work things out. It'll be fine. Which is mature. That's the thing. Max did not like... George was acting like Max was like raging across the paddock. Max was super chill, and he was like, yeah, it was annoying. We'll work it out. It'll be fine. Whereas George is just not over it. It's just quite funny the way they're both approaching it. But this has been thrilling content. You know who I feel bad for? The editors of Drive to Survive, who somehow have to turn this entire season into 10 episodes. Like, the off-track drama, the on-track drama, all of the fucking drama. There's so much. There's literally so much. There's no way it's going to fit into 10 episodes. I don't know what they're going to do. It's going to have to be a really long season. It just will. Anyway, moving on. Lap 3. Random sentimental nonsense. The first one is actually not sentimental, but the Gist, which is like a sports publication, published a carousel of athletes cast as Wicked characters, and they said Daniel Ricciardo was Bach. For anyone who's seen Wicked, what? Literally what? Either the author has never seen Wicked, has never seen any content with Daniel Ricciardo, or both. Because if they have done both, then I have no clue how they put Bach as Daniel Ricciardo. That is an insane take. And just so false. But yes, anyway, respectfully, they're insane. Moving on to actual sentimental stuff. Max Verstappen is having a baby. Kelly Piquet is pregnant. I love, in the most Max Verstappen way, he timed this right after media day. This news came out like Thursday evening or Friday morning. I saw Friday morning. I don't know what time it was in Abu Dhabi. But I love how he timed this so he wasn't asked any questions about it. The Red Bull social media manager did ask him as they were walking. She was like, are you excited to become a dad? And he was like, well, I'm actually already a bonus dad. So I kind of have experience, but yeah, I can't wait to be a dad. Max. And also, speaking of bonus dad, after the race, you could see like Penelope running up to his car, and then when he got out, she like ran up to him again, and he like picked her up and carried her over, and then he went to talk to someone, and she like ran back over to him and was like holding his hand. He's gonna be a great dad. He was asked if he wants his child to be a Formula 1 driver, and he said, I hope not. He said, but if he or she wants to become an F1 driver, I will support them 100%, but I really hope not. Breaking the cycle, Max. We love to see it. Love to see it. Speaking of breaking the cycle, there were so many funny comments on this announcement. One of them was, imagine having Nelson Piquet and Jos Verstappen as your grandfathers. Fair. Terrifying. Another one was, can't wait for this child to race Alonso. Also funny. But there are rumors that he's going to retire because I don't know where these rumors came from. On one hand, I can't possibly fathom him retiring right now. On the other hand, and I know this because I've seen too many posts about it, I'm like, will he retire? And it's feeling like super real, and it's stressing me out. I don't think he's going to retire yet. He was asked about it by the press today, and he was like, no, I'm not going to take a gap year. But that wasn't really the question. The question was, is he going to retire and not take a gap year? So I feel like that answer hasn't really been given, but it's because he said in several interviews that he wants to retire once he has children because he wants to spend more time with them. But he also said that he's had plenty of experience with Penelope, like going between races and still being like a father figure. So he said it should be fine. Don't know. He did do an interview with Heineken Zero where he was asked if he could have a beer with any F1 driver from past or future or past or present, who would it be? And he said, I'd want to have a beer with my friends and family. Family is very important to him. Not that he wants to have a beer with his child. It is Heineken Zero, but like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just showing how much he values family time. He was also in the same interview asked if he were to retire tomorrow, what would be his favorite moment from his F1 career? And he said, leaving the paddock. The way the interviewer giggled and Max's face lit up as if like, it's the way his face always lights up when he makes a joke and someone laughs. Like he looks like he's never been happier. Like he loves when his jokes land. The funniest thing he did say about this was because he now has 8 penalty points after today's incident. And he was asked about what if he's worried about getting more penalty points next year. And he was like, well, I don't know, maybe I'll time my 12th penalty point in time for the baby to be born. And then I could get my race ban and just take parental leave. He's funny. In other sentimental news, Charles and Arthur participated in FP1 together as teammates. They're the first brothers to ever participate in any F1 session as teammates, which is so wholesome. Charles said he had to keep his helmet on all day because he was crying before they even got started. There was a really cute video of Carlos watching on the cameras, like smiling, because it's such a wholesome moment. And Charles was saying how like it broke his father's heart to have to pause Arthur's career because they didn't have enough money to fund 2 F1 careers. And to be able to drive for Ferrari together meant a lot. It was just very cute, very wholesome. The drive side by side, they pan to his mom who was in the garage, and it's just like, it's just such a wholesome family moment. As is everything Charles does. Charles just makes me cry all the time. Charles has been making me cry all week, and I can't handle it. I can't. Speaking of, moving on, lap 4, I think. Farewells. So let's start with the driver's dinner. Lewis organized and Bottas ended up paying. It cost, he said, 20,000, I think, in local currency, which equals to about $5,445 for the driver's dinner. There were 16 of them there, so that's actually not that bad. It's like 200 person for Abu Dhabi. Really not that bad. 2 teams were missing, so Austin and Haas. So Kevin, Nico, Fernando, and Lance were not there, I assume because they had like alternative commitments they couldn't get out of. And as I've already talked about, Lando's Instagram post about the two drivers you're thinking of sitting on opposite ends away from each other, would just like to also say that this might be the most shared Instagram post Lando has ever done. And he has a giant grammar mistake in it. He wrote "you-are" Y-O-U-R. So that's unfortunate. Last I checked, still hasn't been edited, even though he could. Esti Bestie was the first to share the seating arrangements, which we love him for. Also love that he went to that, still not over it. All of the drivers reposted one of those 2 pictures of them all grouped together or sitting around the table. And Oscar posted and captioned it, "Exclusive look at the driver's dinner," with a photo you wouldn't have seen anywhere else. I love Oscar. He and his family have really missed a calling in copywriting because they are so funny in the written word. He's funny out loud, but he's even funnier in the written word. That reminds me, today, I talk a lot about how Oscar is quite mute on the radio, like he doesn't really express much. But today when the thing with Max happened, he went on the radio and said, "Oh, a move of a world champion, that." And then he got told that he got a penalty and he went, "Good." He's just so dry and to the point. I actually do think him and Max would get along super, super well, which is probably why Max like went out of his way to apologize to him. I mean, I think Max apologized to everyone when he knows he's in the wrong. I think he just has a really bad rep for whatever reason. Bad rep, whatever. But like their sense of humor is pretty similar, I think. So I think they would really get on. I do think it was funny at the fan stage thing. It was Williams and McLaren together, and they got asked about whether the driver's dinner was fun, and Oscar was going, well, for some people. And he was like really struggling to answer the question. And then Franco like pipes in, he's like, I think she wants to know about Max and George. And Oscar's like, yeah, that's why he's taking so long to answer. And I just love how Franco piped up as if he's figured out. He's like, I know what they want to know. I think they want to know about Max and George. I love Franco. But the drivers also took a group picture together as a whole team with the FIA initiated one or whatever. And George and Max were next to each other at the bottom. Like no one else is squatting. Everyone's standing, but they're squatting next to each other at the front of the photo. That was definitely intentional. Max definitely thinks it's all hilarious. George is not yet there, I don't think. I think George is still icing off. cooling off. All right, so the Lewis and Mercedes farewell. They said goodbye to him with a very shitty strategy. The only reason this had a modicum of respect and dignity was because Lewis drove so well. It had absolutely nothing to do with Mercedes. They did everything in their power to make this an embarrassing weekend somehow, some way. George dedicated his helmet to Lewis, which was very cute. It was the picture of him as a little kid, like chasing after Lewis for an autograph that like everyone shared when he first joined Mercedes, where it looks like he's like a stalker, like holding out things to autograph. Turns out he never got those autographed. So he had Lewis autograph the same book this weekend, which was actually kind of cute. And also, I think it was so funny because he captioned the helmet, like across the picture said, "Crazy how time flies." And Lewis literally just started laughing out loud when he read that. And George also started laughing, but I have a feeling that George was dead serious with that quote. Like, he's a live, laugh, love type of guy. But when Lewis started laughing, I was like, oh yeah, haha, that's so funny. But he meant it like genuinely. One of my favorite things is that Lewis wore 3 outfits over the weekend. The first one was white and it kind of looked like a mechanic's, like a cool streetwear version of like a mechanic's fit. And then the next outfit was like a ombre sort of white to pink situation. And the last outfit was just like full on red. And it was sort of like his transition from Mercedes to Ferrari. And I just thought it was so cool. It was like 10 out of 10, well done. I almost wonder if he worked on it with La Roche, Zendaya's stylist, because it's very much like the symbolism is very much his vibe. Speaking of outfits, the drivers were asked, the same pairing, the Williams and the McLaren drivers were on fan stage. I think it was last week, but it might have been this week. I can't remember exactly what happened, but they were asked who they would want to dress, who on the grid they would want to dress them. And Oscar immediately says Zhou Guanyu, which is an 10 out of 10 answer. I think Alex said Lewis. And Franco was just incredibly confused by the entire conversation. Like, he just started randomly shouting out drivers. And then he goes, "This is a very strange quiz, no?" Like, why are you asking me this question? I am very much gonna miss Franco. But back to Lewis, I did love that he got so many heartwarming goodbyes from the team, and also that the racing director planned his farewell to like everyone in a Mercedes into his instructions. So there was a place for him to like do his donuts and like come out of the car that was separate from park from where everyone else was. And he like got up on top of the car as if he'd won the race, which like honestly kind of feels like he did in terms of what this race meant to him. He knelt by the car for like a few minutes. Like, I think it was a lot for him. I think it was a very bittersweet moment because like on one hand, so many incredible memories and like records broken and like history made with Mercedes. But at the same time, the last few years have been so shit. Like, I believe he wants absolutely nothing to do with this car ever again. So like, it was probably a lot. I can imagine. I cried. Who would have thought? Me crying at a Lewis moment, but it was really sweet. Other goodbyes included Bottas and Zhou with Kick Sauber. They had an arm guard, like walkway for Zhou and Valtteri. He walked through in an arm in arm. Very, very wholesome. The way Bottas took Zhou under his arm and the way they become friends has been really sweet because I don't think they have that much in common, but they seem to like really respect each other and like each other. It's just been really nice. Kevin Magnussen basically said goodbye to F1. He's done now. I didn't hear it, but apparently his wife got on the radio and said, "Good job. We're so proud of you. Come home to us." I'm really gonna miss his daughter running around the paddock. She was such a little sass ball. She was so cute. So sad to see him go. There's so much changing. Kevin's sort of been a mainstay ever since I became a fan of F1, so it's kind of weird to see him go. Franco also, he DNF'd in the middle of the race, so he got like a sort of a sad goodbye. He did go to the radio and thank them for making his F1 dreams come true. James Vowles got on and said, "Thanks for everything you've given us. Bye." Basically. It was really sad. There's so many sad goodbyes. Okay, I've saved the worst for last. Charles and Carlos. Oh my God. Okay, so I truly believe that there is not a single person on this planet, bar Lewis Hamilton, who stood a chance at taking Carlos's seat. Like, I'm not entirely sure it was the best move for Ferrari. Like, I think I talked about it, like, the relationship between him and Charles is so strong and so unusual for drivers on the grid. Like, no other driver pairing is as equally matched, as good at communicating with each other, and as strong together as they are, not to mention as beautiful. But that's it's like tertiary. So I think removing Carlos is a mistake, but it's an understandable mistake given who's coming in his place. They're definitely not going to be able to create that sort of energy that pairing like Charles and Carlos brought, but they get other stuff with Lewis. So everyone at Ferrari seems super heartbroken for Carlos to be leaving. His PR person, I think her name is Rita, was wiping away tears all Sunday when he was in the media pen as he was like talking about leaving Ferrari. She was literally just sitting there like wiping puddles off her face and like turning away from the camera, but there's like literal puddles coming out of her eyeballs. The sign on the team, on the team picture, you know, where they usually write like what position everyone got, instead of saying their positions, it said torna presto, which apparently translates to come back soon. Charles's helmet was so heartwarming. It said muchas gracias, Carlos, with a chili on it. And then he posted the picture of the helmet and followed it with like pictures of them together throughout the years. And they just had so much fun together, and he's just not gonna have as much fun with Lewis. It's just not gonna be the same. It's gonna be, I'm sure it's still gonna be good in a different way, but it's just not gonna be the same. And then in the post-race press interview, I watched some of it, but Charles went on a whole thing. He was like, there's no one better here to comment on how wonderful Carlos is than me and Lando. So it's good that we're both here. And then he went on a whole thing about how much he's learned from Carlos, how he's learned his mindset and his discipline and his work ethic and his driving abilities. Like, he just went on this whole, I don't know how Carlos wasn't sitting there fucking sobbing about how incredible of a driver Carlos is and how lucky Williams is to have Carlos coming in, because he said if anyone can fix their car, it's Carlos, basically. And how they're very lucky to get a mind like him, because no one is as sensitive to the car and what it does in the same way that Carlos is. So any issue with the car, he'll be able to feel it and tell them what's wrong and what needs to be fixed. Which I think is that checks out for like something he's learned from him. Because Charles is a very intuitive person, and he's not quite as, I always got the vibe he wasn't quite as analytical as Carlos. So I think that's definitely something he's picked up from him. I don't know, it's just, he's been just like flooding Carlos with compliments this entire weekend. And I think Carlos is trying to like not feel, and he's like trying to like not focus on any of the emotions. There was a really funny video of them. They've started filming them doing like the, sim for the track before they get there, and it's that one of them is driving, the other one standing above them and like commenting or like directing them. And they started talking about them leaving, and Charles is like, I'm really gonna miss you. It's actually very sentimental. It's very sad. And Carlos is just going there, when I see you again, in like very off key, and like he just won't stop singing see you again. And Charles is like, I'm trying to have a sentimental moment. And Carlos is like, when I see you again. I think that's just how he's dealing with the fact that he's leaving this team. And he says he's very excited about Williams, and I totally believe he's excited for a challenge, but if he had his way, he would never be leaving Ferrari. But yeah, see you again, by the way, there was an edit made for them when I think the news first came out, and said to see you again. And there's even a video of them driving off in opposite directions in Ferraris that's been used over and over and over again. And so Carlos and Charles have obviously seen the edit. And so they sing it all the time to each other, and it's quite funny. But yeah, Carlos has been singing it this entire weekend, and Charles is like, I'm trying to have a serious moment. Carlos is like, when I see you again. It's really funny. But they've been getting so much shit, and their relationship for some reason, to me, comes off very strong, but for some reason it's always questioned as a PR relationship, and it definitely is not. But every time something, they don't look at each other in the right way, and a quarter of a second that a video is captured, everyone's like, they hate each other. Charles had said that he's not gonna miss Carlos that much because he's gonna be down the road in a different hospitality. And everyone was like, see, he hates Carlos. And Charles has to come back and be like, hey guys, I don't hate Carlos. I just meant that he's not leaving F1. I could literally just walk around the corner and see him. So I'm not gonna miss him that much because he's literally there. I think that also might be why he's been so overly complimentary towards Carlos these last few weeks, because he really wants people to know he loves Carlos and respects him and values him and will miss him. That was the other thing he said in the post-race press conference. He said when he comes back, and then quickly corrected himself, and he was like, well, up back to the top of the grid, whether with us or with another team. But it almost sounds they know how long Lewis plans to stay, and then Carlos will be replacing him back. That's how they keep talking about it. But they're still making this super sad and sentimental and heartbreaking, heartwarming. I don't know. I'm feeling both of it because my heart is filled with so much joy to see so much love for Carlos, but it's heartbreaking because his dream is being stripped away from him. And that's sad. I definitely missed a whole bunch of stuff, but I think that's where I'm gonna stop. Final lap, looking ahead. So Gabriel Bortoleto will be filling the second Sauber seat starting next year. He is Brazilian. He's 20 years old, and he just won the F2 Drivers' Championship. And also in other news, F1 has reached an agreement with GM to join the grid as the 11th constructor in 2026. So that should be quite interesting. Andretti will be heading that team, so he's somehow wormed his way into F1 anyways, despite his bid being rejected. Those are the big changes, other than, of course, all the driver switch-ups. We still don't know what's going to happen with Checo necessarily. We still don't know if he's staying, if Yuki or Liam will take over his seat, if Franco's in the mix, although I've heard rumors that Red Bull is no longer considering Franco for some reason. We don't know if Max is the one leaving, so Checo, that's why, and that's the other rumor, is that if Max is leaving, that's why Checo sounds so confident in interviews that he's staying next year, because he sounds very confident. He's like, yeah, I'm definitely going to be here next year. And everyone's like, why are you definitely going to be here next year? You've done terribly. So that's another thing. The Red Bull Visa Cash RB situation is still very much up in the air. But pretty much everything else is solid. And I just can't wait for next year. The first episode of the 2025 Box season will be Drive to Survive, but there's still one last episode that I usually do, and that's when the Secret Santa video drops. Okay, sorry, I'm actually recording this 3 minutes after I stopped recording. It was a sneak peek of the Secret Santa, and Zhou Guanyu, the gift, or one of the gifts he got Carlos, was a full body chili suit. And Carlos received it, starts laughing, and he goes, if Zhou scores at least 1 point for Kick Sauber before the end of the year, I will take a picture with him wearing this. And then today, he brought it back out, and they all got together, the Kick Sauber team and the Ferrari team and Zhou and Carlos, and he put the chili thing on, and they took a picture together, and it was so funny because I think I saw some of it happening, and I'm like, what is going on? Had no idea, but then I saw the context, and F1 posted it and said it was a quick sneak peek of Secret Santa, and it was just so funny. And Zhou Guanyu was like, he said this before Qatar, which he did, but I just love that they followed through on that, and it's hilarious. Can't wait to see the full Secret Santa video. Okay, bye! And also going over any other potential drama that happens between now and when that video comes out. And given the way this season has gone, I wouldn't hold it past everyone to give us a whole bunch of shit. I assume by then we'll know whether Max is retired, because I feel like let's assume he is retiring. It's so him to wait until there's no press around for him to announce it, so he doesn't have to talk about it. But I also am not sure that's happening. Whatever it is, I think we'll have a lot of answers in terms of all the Red Bull Visa Cash app or whatever they're called, VCarb, their seating arrangements for next year. I think we'll have it by the time the Secret Santa video comes out. So very much looking forward to that. I will see you guys for that in a few weeks. And then after that, we just have to wait for Drive to Survive, which I'm sure will be thrilling. And then it's 2025. I cannot wait. If this year was any indicator of how next year is gonna go, it's gonna be a blast. Thank you everyone for joining me for this season of Box Box. I've had the best time. Sorry it hasn't been fully consistent. Life's been chaotic, but so has this season. So we've had a bunch to talk about. I've had the best time cooking, chatting, eating and drinking with you all. See you guys in just a couple of weeks, I'm sure. But until then, happy holidays and Box Box.